Hello everybody. We will be presenting a case study of racial discrimination in Airbnb. My name is Lionel, and we have Claire, Toby, and KJ. In March 2016, Gregory Sutton decided to try on Airbnb for a short stay for his weekend trip to Philadelphia. He downloaded Airbnb on his mobile phone and created a profile as who he is, with a headshot and standard personal details. He found an apartment to his liking and was also listed free and available during his visit. He sent an inquiry to the host as required and was rejected. The Airbnb host wrote back saying that the place he sent was not available. Sheldon continued his search for listing, and to his surprise, he came across the listing he was rejected earlier on again, where it still appears available. Sheldon was suspicious and decided to do a test. He created 2 more profiles with different names and different personal details, but a change on his ethnicity. Both of the profiles were white names, and his fake inquiry was accepted immediately. What's happening here is a serious issue of house discrimination. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits racial discrimination by inns, hotel, motel, or any other establishment which provide lodging to guests. But the law is unclear. The Civil Rights Act excludes rental in buildings with 5 or fewer rooms, for rent or hire, and which are actually occupied by the provider of such establishment as his residents. The vast majority of Airbnb hosts who rent out only a single room or unit could in theory fall under these exemptions. The consequences of issues. Airbnb spent a lot of money to build back its reputation, for example, rebranding and redesigning their logo, selling this message, one of trust and inclusivity. The company does not want to have anything or related to being racist. Airbnb has been banning hosts that were explicitly racist or transphobic, but subtle bias will always be present and hard to manage. Airbnb says it is holding unconscious bias training for hosts and teaching customer service agents to identify combat hosts who may be inappropriate, refusing to share their space with certain guests. It is also conducting an extensive review on how hosts and guests interact. And the 3 main parties are Gregory, the host, and Airbnb. His main motivation in this entire incident is to bring to light the racial discrimination that is existent within the service of Airbnb. His main motivation is that he's uncomfortable with having an African American accessing his house. Airbnb, their motivation in this incident is to claim that racism is actually not involved. At the start, it was the communication between Sheldon and the host, and it's direct verbal communication through text messages. So from this, we can see that actually Sheldon texted the host through the Airbnb application and then asked for a booking. But the host replied, as you can see from here, that the place is not available at the moment. Sheldon grew suspicious because when he checked back to the app, he realized that actually the listing was still available. So he decided to adopt another form of communication, which is indirect communication. So how he communicated with the host was that he adopted 2 false identities and created them with his same credentials but of a different race. So this is an example. So following which, the reply from the host was to what this character thought was in a stark contrast as was shown previously. So this is a contrast. So this is the host's reply to the two characters. Firstly, the host accept them, and there's an additional info in which that the host was willing to work things out to be able to accommodate both guests. So after the heated exchange of the text messages, Gregory explained the little test that he did and exposed the discrimination that the host had done. He then continued to take screenshots that you see over here of the incident as evidence and posted them online with the intention to make it known to public. So in response to Sheldon's message, which is mostly aggressive and accusing, the host replied with this message. So what he said was, it's a disappointment, people like you always victimize yourself solely on the basis of skin color. So using the words people like you is kind of like stereotyping the other group, even though it might not be of the specific race, but ultimately it's still discriminating. So in a sense, like the host is kind of retaliating back to his response.
Okay, so KJ has went through the analysis of the whole situation. So right now, I will go through the cultural factors that contribute to the issue. So basically what happened was that when Mr. Sheldon tried to book the Airbnb, he expected a few things. So he expected a very simple transaction. He expected a hassle-free transaction as well, and to get the home relatively simply. However, in reality, what happened was his request was denied, and there was a case of racial discrimination. So this means that his expectation was violated, and this is a case of negative expectation violation. So a very simple transaction very quickly derailed to a case of racial discrimination. Okay, moving on. For Mr. Sheldon's perspective, this is a case of racial profiling, which is a case whereby a person is judged based on the stereotypes of their race. So this is evident from a quote that the host mentioned while rejecting while confronted by Sheldon. So the host said, people like you always victimize yourselves solely based on basis of your skin color. They need to say that he stereotyped all the blacks to victimize themselves based on their skin color, which is a case of racial profiling. Aside from racial profiling, the host actually shows signs of ethnocentrism, which is a case whereby a person thinks that his race is superior and everything else revolves around his race. So this is evident from how he treats different groups. So basically, when interacting with the blacks, if someone sends him an offer, he declines the offer without any explanation readily. So this is how he responds to an out-group. Whereas to how he responds to in-group, perhaps based on Mr. Sheldon's test, he actively communicates to his in-group, the whites, and aside from that, he even tried his best to ensure equal treatment based on the test that Mr. Sheldon did. He reached out to the fake profiles to make sure both of them would be treated fairly. So this is very evident a case of ethnocentrism, as he treated his in-group very well. By contrast, he treated his out-group very poorly. So where does Airbnb come into play in this whole conflict? So with this whole conflict, Airbnb actually adopted an avoiding orientation. So what they did was they had a goal to delay the situation. They hoped the situation would pass over time, which means they did not actively make a stand and hope that the situation would pass. However, Mr. Sheldon, he chose a completely different approach, whereby he adopted a competing orientation. So his goal was not to delay and leave the situation to die. However, he had a goal to expose this racial discrimination that was within Airbnb. So these conflicting orientations that respective parties adopted led to a clash. So basically, Airbnb's unassertive orientation clashed with Mr. Sheldon's assertive orientation, and this led to Mr. Sheldon ultimately filing a legal lawsuit against Airbnb.
So for the strategies, the first one will be to promote diversity. Currently, Airbnb's company only have 46% women, 63% white people, 71% Latinos, and 2.9% of black. So what we propose is for the company to expand the diversity of their employees. The concept we'll be touching on will be the contact hypothesis, where employers are kind of like forced to work together and come up with ideas to promote strategies. This will help their platform. The next strategy will be going for advertisement. Currently, Airbnb's advertisement usually promotes like travel lifestyle and promoting people to get out of the house and travel, but we would like them to promote more on discrimination and racial tolerance. They have one of the example of their advertisement is their newest one called We Accept. It's basically an advertisement that just shows a group of people and titles promoting acceptance, but however, this advertisement did not receive a very good feedback, and people without the basic knowledge of racial discrimination will not understand the advertisement. Hosts who demonstrate a pattern of rejecting guests from protected class may be suspended from Airbnb platform. This can be served as a warning for hosts who are disrespectful and overly picky. However, Airbnb did not explain how they actually going to identify this pattern of rejection based on the subjective criteria. The reason for rejecting a guest might be due to other reasons that cannot be clearly justified as a discriminatory intent. We also know that even with the non-discrimination policy, people don't actually read the terms and conditions thoroughly before they accept or enter a new platform. So we would like to come up with new solutions such as pop-up messages to constantly remind people of this problem and remind them that the consequences of it. This solution is called communicative solution. Airbnb has a few new tools such as the flagging tool, such that any guests or hosts who receive like bad or hate speech will be able to flag the tool, and Airbnb will be able to intervene immediately. Another tool that they come up with is a 24 hours policy, such that if there happens to be any problem, Airbnb will be able to intervene and provide customer support. Example, if a host accidentally cancels on a guest due to discrimination policy, Airbnb will immediately find a place for the guest even though it is not on the Airbnb platform. Also, if the host refuses to accommodate the guest even though the dates are available, Airbnb will cancel and block out the dates on the host calendar such that no one will be able to block it. And lastly, they came up with a policy called the instant booking, such that guests will be able to instant book a listing without being like thoroughly scanned, and that will benefit both the company and hosts and guests. However, even though it might seem disadvantageous for the hosts get to actually cancel on it, but then when they cancel on it, Airbnb actually has to intervene the reason for cancellation. Next up, we will propose a strategy that allows guests to not feel like obliged to put up a display picture, and maybe set a privacy setting such that only the display picture will be shown after the acceptance of the listing. We believe that such privacy settings already exist, such that, for example, Airbnb hosts contact information like phone number and email will only be shown after the guest confirms a booking. So we would like to propose this similar setting for the display picture, such that stereotype concepts will not apply, because we tend to categorize people immediately when we see the display picture and evaluate them based on the stereotypical things that we hear and see. So if even after the display picture is shown after accepting and the host still feels uncomfortable due to other reasons that are not like racial discrimination, they are able to cancel on the guests. However, they have to fill out a questionnaire, and Airbnb has to look out for such problems.
lastly is recognizing privileges. I think it's important for people in the majority group to recognize the privileges they have, and as such, Airbnb can come up with ways to offer unconscious bias training for hosts. So once the host completes the training, Airbnb will highlight them on the platform such that it will constantly prompt them of this issue. It's important to raise awareness for this issue such that people will be more tolerant and sensitive to the people around us. And also, Airbnb can come up with weekly reminders and email sending to hosts and guests about such issues, and also basically raising awareness.